That day at the Westfield Mall in Seattle, a strange event took place. No one could have imagined that a normal scene would turn into an emotional and life-threatening story. It all started when a police dog, a Malinois named Ray, suddenly barked fiercely at a pregnant woman walking in the shopping area. This not only caused panic and anxiety for the people around but also signaled an important event that would happen later. Ray, an indispensable member of the police team, always has outstanding detection skills, specially trained to detect drugs, explosives and even signs of health hazards. Ray is one of the best police dogs. That day, Ray and his partner, Officer Lucy Carter, were dispatched to the shopping center after a robbery. Everything seemed normal, just another investigation like any other. But then, when Ray entered the shopping center, something changed. Suddenly, the police dog started barking continuously at the pregnant woman, confusing Lucy and the people around. It was not a normal warning bark but a rapid, urgent bark, as if Ray was trying to convey something important. Everyone started looking at each other, then at Ray, then at the pregnant woman, Sarah Winters. Lucy Carter, a veteran police officer, could not help but notice the unusual behavior in Ray's actions. She had worked with Ray for the past 3 years and had never seen the dog behave like this. Usually when Ray barked, it was a signal of drugs, explosives, or some serious case. But today, the bark had a different tone. Unlike when Ray discovered drugs or dangerous materials, this time it was anxiety. Ray's eyes were no longer calm as usual, but filled with urgency, as if something was really wrong. Sarah, a pregnant woman standing nearby, immediately felt panicked. She put her hand on her belly, instinctively protecting the child in her womb. It was certain that Ray's appearance and the police dog's constant barking made Sarah feel uncomfortable. "What's wrong? Is this dog dangerous?" she asked anxiously, her voice trembling. The people around, everyone started to point their phones to film, forming a circle around Sarah and Ray. Lucy looked at Ray, then back at Sarah, noticing the tension in the air. She quickly went forward to calm Sarah down and explain Ray's actions. "Sorry for the inconvenience. Ray is a police dog and can detect many things. But today his actions seem a bit unusual," Lucy said, her voice soft but somewhat worried. "He's not dangerous, just a warning." However, Ray's barking did not stop. Ray's eyes still did not leave Sarah's stomach. Lucy had never seen Ray act like this before. Her heart felt heavy. How could a police dog react like this? She had witnessed Ray detecting many dangerous cases. But cases like this, where the police dog was not searching for drugs or criminals, but detecting a health problem, this was the first time. A thought flashed through Lucy's mind. Ray is warning about a health problem for Sarah. She looked at Sarah and asked again, "Do you feel any discomfort or pain? Is there anything unusual in your body?" Sarah looked at Lucy, then slowly shook her head, replying, "No, I just feel a little tired in my back and a little pressure. The stomach pain is not strong, just normal during pregnancy." However, Ray did not stop barking and the dog continued to pull hard on the leash, aiming at Sarah's stomach with unprecedented tension. Lucy felt an indescribable unease. Her heart tightened when she thought about what Ray had done before, discovering people trapped under the rubble, discovering cases of internal bleeding, and even discovering a case of a ruptured brain. Ray had never been wrong. She suddenly felt responsible for what was happening. Although there was nothing to indicate that Sarah was in obvious danger, Lucy still decided to take action. "I think you should get a checkup, just to make sure everything is okay," Lucy said. "Ray has never been wrong. I recommend you get a doctor to check it out." Sarah looked at her husband, Tom, then back at Lucy. She smiled slightly, but she was still worried. "We still have to go to the doctor. But if you think I need to check, that's fine." Although there was no obvious sign of anything serious, Lucy decided not to ignore Ray's warning signs. People in the mall were still standing around, some continuing to film, while the security guards tried to keep order. But Lucy couldn't keep her eyes off him. Ray, a Malinois police dog, is not only an important member of the Seattle police force but also a trusted assistant in many dangerous missions. With special training, Ray is able to detect drugs, explosives and many other dangerous materials, helping the police investigate and protect the community more effectively. But today, Ray is at the Westfield Mall, not to investigate a drug or explosive case, but to solve a completely different situation. When Lucy Carter, Ray's partner, received a report of a burglary in the area, She did not expect that today's job would bring a big surprise. The burglary at Westfield Mall was a fairly simple case, involving a man caught red-handed stealing some electronic products. This was an ordinary job for a veteran police officer like Lucy. However, when Lucy and Ray entered the shopping mall, the atmosphere immediately became tense. The people around noticed their appearance. The curious and worried eyes of the shoppers gradually turned to excitement. Ray, a dog trained to identify and handle dangerous situations, entered the shopping area with a confident and calm demeanor. People started filming and watching. But when Ray approached a pregnant woman, Sarah Winters, everything suddenly changed. Ray did not just pass by but suddenly stopped. His eyes fixed on Sarah's belly. Ray's entire body tensed up. His ears perked up, and barking began to ring out continuously. The people standing around, including Lucy, all felt the difference in Ray's actions. She felt the anxiety in her heart when Ray continued to bark incessantly. Not like usual, but as if trying to announce something important. Lucy understood that Ray's actions were not random. They were signs of a situation that the dog had long been trained to recognize, a dangerous situation that normal humans would not recognize. Lucy's anxiety stemmed not only from Ray's unusual actions, but also from the fact that she clearly saw that, although Sarah did not appear to be injured, Ray was signaling a hidden danger that she could not ignore. When Ray started barking at the pregnant woman Sarah Winters, everyone around him was confused. This was not the usual reaction of a police dog trained to detect drugs, explosives, and dangerous materials. This Malinois, with its strong appearance and sharp instincts, usually only acted like that when it encountered a real threat. But this time, Ray's bark was not a warning but full of anxiety. Ray did not just stand still and bark, but his entire attitude and actions changed. Instead of running around, searching for traces like usual, Ray stopped and focused on a single point, Sarah's belly. The dog's eyes were tense, and Ray's body was stiff as if he was fighting something invisible but extremely important. Ray's barks were not simple warning sounds, but deep, powerful barks, as if the dog was trying to tell everyone that something was wrong. This left Lucy confused, but more than anything, worried. Ray was never wrong when it came to giving a warning, and if the dog was reacting like this, then something serious was definitely going on. Lucy looked at Sarah and asked her if she felt anything unusual. Sarah, with a worried face, said that she only felt a little pain in her back and a slight pressure in her stomach. However, Ray continued to bark incessantly and tugged on the leash. Lucy saw the obvious tension in the way Ray was behaving, something she had never seen before. Unable to ignore this warning, Lucy decided to take immediate action. "Do you feel anything?" Lucy asked again, but her eyes were no longer waiting for an answer, but preparing for action. Lucy knew this was no ordinary sign. Ray had found people trapped under rubble, detected major accidents, but this time the dog was alerting to something the machines couldn't detect. Sarah might have a serious internal problem that had no obvious symptoms. And Ray, with his superior detection abilities, was the only one who could see it. Even though Sarah claimed that she only felt a slight strain in her back and pressure in her abdomen, Lucy couldn't ignore Ray's clear warning. She knew that, in the 3 years she had worked with Ray, the dog had never acted like this without a good reason. Ray was no ordinary police dog. He was specially trained to detect things that humans couldn't detect using traditional methods. Ray not only searched for drugs, weapons, and explosives, but could also detect medical problems, such as internal bleeding or potentially dangerous situations that medical machines couldn't detect. Therefore, regardless of whether Sarah felt fine or not, Lucy knew that she couldn't ignore Ray's actions. Lucy's reason told her that if Ray had warned her, there might be a serious problem lurking that no one had noticed. She couldn't take the risk, especially when Sarah's life and the life of her unborn child were at stake. Lucy turned to look at Sarah, her voice gentle but filled with determination. "I think it's best for you to get a little checkup, just to make sure there's nothing serious." Sarah looked at Lucy, her expression worried but also a little confused. She never thought that her slight pain could be so serious. But looking into Lucy's serious eyes, Sarah felt the determination in her words. The uneasiness in Lucy's heart did not go away easily. She couldn't help but recall the times when Ray had discovered dangerous situations. Situations that no one could have expected. From discovering a person trapped under the rubble to finding a victim with internal bleeding that the doctors couldn't recognize. Ray had never been wrong. And this time was no exception. Even though there were no obvious symptoms, Lucy felt that ignoring Ray's warning was unacceptable. Are you sure you don't feel anything unusual? Lucy asked again, part question, part urgent advice. Sarah shook her head, but her eyes were filled with concern. Maybe I should get checked out, she said, then looked at her husband, Tom, for approval. Tom didn't object, though he didn't quite understand why Lucy was so adamant. But for Lucy, this wasn't the time to argue. Ray's feelings weren't wrong, and she wouldn't let anything get in the way of keeping Sarah and her baby safe. Even though Sarah claimed that she only felt a slight strain in her back and pressure in her abdomen, Lucy couldn't ignore Ray's clear warning. She knew that, in the 3 years she had worked with Ray, the dog had never acted like this without a good reason. Ray was no ordinary police dog. He was specially trained to detect things that humans couldn't detect using traditional methods. Ray not only searched for drugs, weapons, and explosives, but could also detect medical problems, such as internal bleeding or potentially dangerous situations that medical machines couldn't detect. Therefore, regardless of whether Sarah felt fine or not, Lucy knew that she couldn't ignore Ray's actions. Lucy's reason told her that if Ray had warned her, there might be a serious problem lurking that no one had noticed. She couldn't take the risk, especially when Sarah's life and the life of her unborn child were at stake. Lucy turned to look at Sarah, her voice gentle but filled with determination. I think it's best for you to get a little checkup, just to make sure there's nothing serious. Sarah looked at Lucy, her expression worried but also a little confused. She never thought that her slight pain could be so serious. But looking into Lucy's serious eyes, Sarah felt the determination in her words. The uneasiness in Lucy's heart did not go away easily. She couldn't help but recall the times when Ray had discovered dangerous situations. Situations that no one could have expected. From discovering a person trapped under the rubble to finding a victim with internal bleeding that the doctors couldn't recognize. Ray had never been wrong. And this time was no exception. Even though there were no obvious symptoms, Lucy felt that ignoring Ray's warning was unacceptable. Are you sure you don't feel anything unusual? Lucy asked again, part question, part urgent advice. Sarah shook her head, but her eyes were filled with concern. Maybe I should get checked out, she said, then looked at her husband, Tom, for approval. Tom didn't object, though he didn't quite understand why Lucy was so adamant. But for Lucy, this wasn't the time to argue. Ray's feelings weren't wrong, and she wouldn't let anything get in the way of keeping Sarah and her baby safe. Even though Sarah had been examined by a paramedic and there were no signs of danger, Lucy still couldn't help but feel uneasy. She felt that Ray had never been a police dog who made a mistake in the past 3 years. And this time was no exception. Ray had detected extremely dangerous situations, such as victims trapped under rubble, or a serious accident that no machine could detect. To Lucy, if Ray reacted so strongly, there must be something going on that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. Even though Sarah had been examined by a paramedic at the mall and there were no worrying signs, Lucy still couldn't stop. A feeling of anxiety kept coming over her. And unlike the previous times, Lucy didn't want to take any chances this time. Her dog had never been wrong. And if Ray detected something unusual, she wouldn't just ignore it. As she returned to the car, Lucy decided not to leave it at that. She knew she had to do something, even if it was just to double check. A strong feeling told her that the situation was not as simple as it seemed to her and everyone else. I'll keep an eye on it, Lucy told herself, though she didn't want to make things any more tense than they already were. But if it was something serious, she wouldn't forgive herself for ignoring it. Lucy's uneasy feeling continued as she looked back at Ray. Her police dog hadn't taken his eyes off Sarah, his gaze steady and determined. Lucy knew Ray well, and she knew that if the dog was reacting like this, it wasn't the time to just do what was theoretically necessary. She had to act on what Ray was telling her. After Sarah left the mall and was examined by the doctor, Lucy still felt a nagging sense of unease. It was a warning that something was missing. And if she ignored it this time, it might be too late. Ray had never been wrong in the 3 years she had worked with her. And if the dog was alerting her, it was a dangerous situation that no one else could see. Lucy decided to do something she had never considered, a decisive next step. She started driving towards Sarah's apartment complex, where she could learn more about Sarah and her unborn child. Even though there was no clear reason to check further, Lucy still felt that her responsibility was not over. Ray had always been accurate. And this feeling was impossible to ignore. She couldn't let such an important sign go by without checking again. When she arrived at Bellevue Heights, Lucy was faced with a difficult decision. She had no official reason to see Sarah again, but she still felt compelled. At the entrance, Lucy was stopped by a security guard who looked at her suspiciously when he saw Ray with her. But when Lucy showed her permit and explained the situation, the security guard couldn't refuse and agreed to let her in. When she entered Sarah's apartment, Lucy felt more nervous than ever. She followed Ray's intuition, not out of curiosity or randomness. She just knew that if she ignored it, it might be an irreversible mistake. Ray still didn't stop reacting strongly, leading her to Sarah, who was resting on the sofa. Looking at Sarah, Lucy noticed the tired and worried look on her face. Even though she had checked, she knew that things weren't simple this time, and what Ray discovered would definitely be the answer to Lucy's doubts.